Hi everyone, I'm Zoya Hassan and I'm here with Blake Resnick, the founder and CEO of Brink. Blake, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you have built this amazing company that's working with first responders all over the US. You're providing them with these high-tech, high-capability drones. But you were barely 18 years old when you started this company. So what made you take the leap into entrepreneurship and specifically in the public safety realm?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved the idea of maybe starting a company someday. I think like watching Iron Man when I was 11 or whatever influenced me a little bit. And I've always loved aerospace. So like I grew up reading about Skunk Works and Kelly Johnson, the development of the SR-71 and like all these amazing projects. But when I was really young, I couldn't really design a fighter jet, but I could design a drone. So that's how things started for me, like generally getting interested in the drone industry. But I knew people that were along the strip during the October 1 shooting, and I grew up in Vegas. So I never conceptualized before that building technology for first responders, but that event definitely pushed me in that direction.
That's an incredible kind of story to launch your company with. But how did you get started and why like drones specifically?
You know, I didn't actually. So after that event occurred, I reached out to Vegas, the SWAT team, and to their SWAT commander. They agreed to have lunch with like 18-year-old me at the time, which I was grateful for. And in the beginning of that interaction, we talked, initially a lot about what happened during October 1, but then the conversation broadened out to the rest of their jobs, the high-risk warrant searches and barricades and hostage rescue missions that a team like Vegas Metro SWAT has to deal with on a daily basis. And I walked away from that interaction thinking that if they just had a way to get eyes and ears in dangerous places, that would be a life-saving capability. And whatever like carries around the camera payload and like the two-way audio system is sort of secondary. But they do need a way to get all of those sensors into a dangerous situation, to avoid escalation or risking human life. And drones just happen to be a really good way to do that because they can fly up to, the fourth story of a building. We built the first drone in the world that has a glass breaker, so it can actually shatter out a window, make entry inside of a structure, start looking around, find someone, and then enable a crisis negotiator to talk to them. Whereas like a terrestrial platform or anything else, it wouldn't have that capability or be able to, fly upstairs easily or many other things. So drones are just the right way to carry around the sensors that we need.
So tell me a little bit about, yourself and growing up and what made you the best person to build these drones then for these teams and now teams across the United States.
I've just had like a lifelong passion for science and engineering and aerospace, right? So like I've been building drones since I was really young. I built a fusion reactor in my garage too, which freaked out my neighbors thoroughly, but I had some fun with it. So that did deuterium fusion and was a great way for me to learn more about high vacuum systems and high voltage electronics and gas regulation and like neutron detection, all of this sort of stuff. And I worked on supersonic rockets, and I was always something, right? And I think that really equipped me with a lot of the early technical skills that I needed to take on some of the projects that were associated with building Brink. Did some cool internships too at like McLaren, Tesla, and DJI, and those were also all very educational. So that set me up well to build what turned into this company.
And this is all before you're barely starting college.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, I started college when I was 14.
Oh, what?
Yeah. So
tell me about that.
Yeah, it was weird. Well, it was definitely an interesting process for me. So I'm dyslexic. So when I was really young, I struggled to like learn how to read or spell or like anything like that. So when I started my educational journey, like it wasn't easy. Like I really had to work very hard to like even operate at grade level. But I got very lucky with my parents, and they noticed this about me when I was pretty young and enrolled me in like after school programs and whatever else. And that like really helped me ramp up. So that happened over the course of a couple of years. Then I started doing pretty well in school. So we decided for me to skip 6th grade. So I went from 5th to 7th in middle school. Did that, went to high school for about a year, and then I started taking college classes at UNLV. But then I ended up transferring over to Northwestern.
Wow.
And I was there for about 6 months before I dropped out with the Thiel Fellowship. So that was sort of my full educational history.
That's incredible. So you're like this mastermind here, actually.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I struggled. I certainly struggled a lot. But like, I think it also taught me some level of resilience, right? And like reinforced in my brain that just like working very hard at something can actually make a huge difference and like fix a problem that you care about. And that's something that I have kept with me.
That's incredible. So 18-year-old Blake goes to the Vegas Metro team.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So, I mean, really the first interaction was at lunch, which went well, but the SWAT team was trying to figure me out, right? Like I was super young. At that point, I had worked at some interesting places and taken on projects. So, I seemed somewhat legitimate, but they still weren't sure that like this was going to turn into anything. So we had this conversation. I learned a lot about their jobs. I came up with an idea of what I wanted to build for them. Went back to my mom's house, engineered like the first version of what was ultimately the lemur drone. And I was like very proud of my creation. Like I worked super hard on this. I thought I totally nailed what they needed. Set up this big meeting with their full SWAT team, like the commander, but also all like their full team. Drove out to this like clandestine SWAT hangar that they have with like aircraft and armored vehicles and stuff. And I delivered this demonstration very proudly of what I made. And I remember very vividly, there was a moment where I thought things were going well. Clearly, they disagreed with that. There was a moment when one of the SWAT operators, mid-demo, walked up to my drone as it was flying around. He had a towel in his hand, and he slapped the drone out of the sky in front of everyone. And he looked at me dead in the eye, and he was like, this is going to happen within the first 45 seconds of your first SWAT call out. And if your drone can't flip itself over and continue a mission after that, this is going to be like completely worthless to us. And that just started this like 30-minute duration where everyone was telling me what was wrong with my thing and why it would never work. And they didn't encourage me to give up, but they made it clear like a lot had to change, which at the time I didn't love. But I kind of look back on it fondly because I think in their way, they were like really honestly trying to educate me on what had to be improved for any of this to be viable. So I took all that feedback, went back to my mom's house, totally re-engineered the drone, set up another demo, gave that demo. That time they liked it more. And what they said at the end of the interaction was, you know, we see that this has improved a lot and we're interested in testing this out on submissions. We're not ready to buy it, but like we would like to test it. And you've been pretty good to work with. So if you want to come along with us on some of those missions and like pay attention to what works and what doesn't work and continue improving it, like we'd love to invite you along on some SWAT callouts. So that seemed like a good thing to agree to. And it ultimately started this like 6-month period where I would go on call with Vegas Metro SWAT. They put me like on the communicator. So I would get the 3 a.m. notification when there was like a barricade somewhere in Vegas's valley. And then I would grab my latest prototype drones and like throw them in my mom's SUV and like drive out there and hand them to the team and then watch them use the aircraft. And certainly the beginning of that was a learning experience, but like by the end, we started changing the way that SWAT callouts would happen, where like we would find the person hiding in the closet that SWAT didn't know was there.
Wow.
Or like our drone would be the thing that they use to initially establish communications with a suspect, which is always a huge deal because like if you're able to do that, you reduce the risk associated with a call out dramatically. And at the end of that, they became our first customer.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
It's one thing though to be this incredible engineer, make all this technology. It's a completely other thing to run a business.
Yeah, that's true.
So how did you navigate that space? Because you're not just founder, you're also CEO, right? So how do you navigate being a business leader? I
just failed a lot. Right? I mean, it's like, that's the honest answer. I think in the beginning, I definitely had a lot to learn. I made mistakes with like early hires and go-to-market motion and like many fairly important things. But I think I also I was paying attention to what worked and like what didn't work. And I got better. I mean, I got better at hiring and selecting talent, and I got better at understanding what works to sell to local government buyers, and everything just sort of progressively improved. And one thing I do think that's kind of cool about building a startup is you have to pass like certain skill checks before you're allowed to proceed in a lot of cases. So like if I was a really bad like product person or a really bad salesperson, like I probably would not have gotten through that first interaction with the SWAT team. And then if I was a really bad engineer, I wouldn't have gotten through the demos. Like even, it took a few, but like eventually we got there, right? If I was a really bad trainer, the SWAT operators that I was working with would not have been successful with our technology. If I was a really bad manufacturing technician, like I wouldn't have been able to build the early drones because I hand built our first aircraft, right? And like everything continues like that. If I was bad at fundraising, I wouldn't be able to hire. If I was like very bad at hiring perpetually, like I wouldn't be able to unlock future rounds or hit certain revenue milestones. So, I mean, there is some element to building a startup that, it's like a linear progression, right? Where like you have to succeed at the stuff that you've taken on to the extent necessary to move on to the next stage.
Absolutely. How long did it take to go from working out of your mom's house to then having an office, and now you have this headquarters in Seattle? Tell me about that story.
Oh yeah, that was like years. It was pretty painful couple of years too. I mean, I felt for a while like Brink was just not succeeding. I mean, it felt for definitely a moment there that everything I was trying like wasn't working. But you keep going and you keep improving things, and I think momentum and traction builds on itself, and it allows you to grow and accomplish things.
Yeah, and I remember when we last chatted, you told me that although you had a Thiel Fellowship, you had a really hard time fundraising. And, I can see that, an 18-year-old going to investors and telling them about this huge idea that it's kind of a life or death situation with public safety and drones. So I know there's a fun story with how you actually ended up getting that first big check, if you want to share.
Yeah, totally. Yes. Yeah, so the way this worked was I had failed to fundraise several times. And I was complaining to one of my friends from college about this. He told me like, hey, I know this guy, he's a TikTok influencer manager, and he's starting to get into startup investing. And if you want to meet him, like I can introduce you, and like maybe he'll invest in your company. And I'm like, I have no better options. So yes, more than happy to meet him. So we go set up a Zoom call. I log on. He joins maybe like 7-8 minutes later, and he is shirtless in bed with another dude for my pitch meeting to like pitch him on my startup and investing in my thing. So it's, and I mean, kind of walking into it knowing he's a TikTok influencer manager, like my expectations were massively high, but like the moment that happened, they completely fell through the floor. But again, like I'm here, so I'm gonna do my thing. So I start my pitch. I get maybe 2 minutes in. He holds up his hand. He's like, "Hey, stop! Like, I'm not smart enough to know if I should invest in this, but I know some people. I'm going to invite them into the call, and then they'll tell me if I should invest in you or not." And then he like turns off his video. Okay, interesting. So a couple of minutes go by. 2 new people like join the Zoom. He turns his video back on. He's like, "Okay, go." And I go and like at this point not so enthusiastically finish my pitch for like the next 20 minutes and think I just wasted the last 40 minutes of my life. Then a couple hours go by and I get this call from an unknown number that I don't recognize. I answer it. The person on the other end says, "Hey, I'm one of the people that this TikTok influencer manager invited into your pitch call. I'm actually Sam Altman's ex-boyfriend, and I think what you're building is really cool. And if you're interested, I would love to introduce you to him." It's like, yes, I would definitely like that to happen. So we get connected up over email, set up a meeting with Sam, just like an initial Zoom call. It's 30 minutes, which I'm nervous about because my pitch is way too long. At this point, it's like 40. So I know I'm going to have to like get through it in order to, have any chance here. So log on, and like 1 minute goes by, 2 minutes go by, 5 minutes go by, like 6 minutes go by. He joins. Now I'm really freaking out because I know like 24 minutes is definitely not enough. But I go, I do my thing. I get about halfway through my normal pitch. Then he holds up his hand. He's like, hey, Blake, I'm really sorry. I have to go and jump on a call with Elon Musk right now. But I think what you're working on is really interesting, and I'll send you an email and we'll go from there. I click end call. Get an email a couple hours later. He asks like 4 questions. I answer the 4 questions, and then his reply was, okay, I'll take your seed round.
Wow.
And that was our first investment.
How much was it?
$2 million from him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a fun story.
I know, isn't that crazy? So I guess I take the call. It's like the lesson.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal for me. I mean, that's what enabled me to like move out of my parents' house, get our first office, get our first factory, like hire manufacturing technicians and salespeople. And then Alex Wang of Scale AI also participated in that seed round. He introduced me to the folks that ultimately led our Series A, like Mike Volpe in particular at Index Ventures. Which is a $25 million round that happened maybe 6 months after our seed, which like up-leveled us even more. And then we were really off to the races.
What do you think other investors couldn't see in the company that Sam Altman and Alexander Wang saw pretty immediately?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think Sam Altman, to some extent, already had a vision for emergency response drones. I mean, he's an incredibly smart person. I think he sort of sees the future in a lot of different domains. And I think he conceptualized a lot of what we were building before we first interacted. And I think he also likes McLaren Automotive and like Tesla, DJI, and he's into fusion. So we just had a lot of commonality, like shared interests and passions. So like the combination of that and also him already thinking a little bit about the thesis for our company made it easier for him to invest.
Is he still involved in the company, or at least in the early days, was he heavily involved?
Yeah, he has been.
I know he's busy.
He's incredibly busy, but I've gotten to spend a lot of time with him over the course of the last couple of years. And I mean, I just have nothing but the utmost respect for the dude.
Do you think there was, when you look back and you're like, thinking, okay, why didn't the other investors invest? Do you think there could be something to do with the way you pitched at the time, the way,
totally,
because
yes.
I'm trying to connect dots here. And it's like,
yeah,
you had 20 minutes with Sam Altman and you locked it down, whereas you're here saying with your other investors, your pitch was 40 minutes long. So what were some of the lessons you learned from that very first, raising journey?
My pitch was actually similar to like everyone that I talked to. With Sam, I just got through less of it.
Less of it, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's probably a lesson in there too, that like there are absolutely ways to optimize your pitch and to get better at that. And I think the first time I ever fundraised, which was our seed, like I was not very good. But at the same time, like the person on the other end has to be correct for you. Like they have to, that's very important. I think investors sort of decide if they're interested broadly in your idea or not before even taking your call. So if someone is like walking into the interaction thinking that your sector is fascinating and that you're the market leader and that you're intelligent and like capable, your pitch could be worse and like it could all still result in a better outcome versus interacting with someone that has like no idea that your industry even exists, and like that can be hard. Or even worse, like thinks they understand your industry but have a lot of incorrect preconceived notions that you have to overcome. Like that's sort of the worst.
Yeah.
So there's a spectrum of potential outcomes here, and in order to get a round done, I think it is advisable to spend as much effort as you can putting yourself in the room with the correct folks, as opposed to like really having to convince people that your thing is worth caring about.
Absolutely. This month you announced a $75 million round. Where does that bring your total funding?
About 157 million.
So a long way from that 2 million.
Yes.
What changed in those second, third rounds, I'm sure at that point you have a product to show, a company to show, but maybe not the 75 million because that was just now, but the round you raised right after, that first seed, what was different with that one?
I think a couple core things were different. I wasn't a kid working out of his mom's house anymore, so that was beneficial. We had a team, we had much more revenue, we had a much more competent product, we had positive customer references, and also when we were raising the Series A, we had the credibility of Alex Wang and Sam Altman behind us, and like all of those things were unbelievably beneficial and powerful, and we raised at a good time in the market. So like all of that helped.
Now, obviously, you've come a long way. Tell me about, who you're working with, how many states you've tackled so far.
Yep, we have customers in all 50 states.
Amazing. How many are we talking?
About 600, a little over 600.
600. And I want to hear about the product. What are these customers, these first responders, because I assume everybody is a first responder in this customer base. What are they getting? What are they using?
Yep. So we have two core products right now. We have an interior tactical drone, which is where we started. And then we have a citywide 911 response drone mesh. So, and that's really the product that I started Brink to create. So it's very exciting that it's out now. Kind of the way it works is we put a drone recharging station on top of police and fire station roofs in like big grids around jurisdictions. And then we integrate that with computer-aided dispatch. So the second someone calls 911, we grab the GPS coordinate that's associated with that emergency. We find the nearest recharging pod to that 911 call. We automatically dispatch a drone, send it there at 60 miles an hour. And then when it arrives, it can deliver emergency medical payloads like Narcan, defibrillators, EpiPens, personal flotation devices. That one in particular I'm excited about because drownings are actually a serious problem. And it's difficult for first responders to get out like into the ocean or into a pond within a couple of minutes of like a 911 call coming in about a drowning. So the idea of, deploying a drone and getting there in 60 seconds, then delivering a flotation device that inflates the moment it hits the water is very compelling. And I think just like a clear social good. So we can deliver all those payloads, but we can also just provide first responders more information about the situation that they're about to walk into. So our drones have thermal imagers. They can see heat signatures, meaning they can tell firefighters how bad a fire is before they arrive. They can see through smoke and detect hotspots, so they can direct hose placement to ensure that you're extinguishing things as efficiently as possible. In the context of a police response, they could tell, police officers if a person is holding a gun or something else before they show up, all of the above.
So what are some of the dangers of that? What are some of the risks you're taking when you're operating or when you're using a drone in a life or death situation?
I mean, really, the drones are all about reducing risk for everyone involved. It's about capturing more information so first responders know what they're about to walk into. And so, situations don't unfold where preventable escalation occurs. So yeah, really, that's the goal of all of our technology.
How do you test the product? Because when you're using them with these very high stakes individuals, how do you make sure it works?
Yeah, that's a good question. We test everything extensively. So we'll test things on a subsystem level, motors and propellers and printed circuit boards. We'll expose all of those items to various elemental conditions, so high temperatures, low temperatures, rain, everything that you would sort of expect. And then we test our drones at a system level too. So we'll expose them to super hostile environments and just get in absolutely as many flight hours as we can. But it is hard to engineer drones. Like, environments vary a lot around the United States, around the world. We have to deal with electromagnetic interference. Like, if there's tons of Wi-Fi in a building, that can screw with our radios, and we've had to invest a lot of engineering into rectifying that. In some cases, you have a good GPS signal because you might be flying outside away from big buildings. But if you're flying indoors, you don't have GPS, or if you're flying close to big buildings, you might also not have a very strong GPS signal, meaning that you need other technologies to teach the drone where it is in the world and how it's moving, which are also challenging to engineer engineered because they rely on LiDAR sensors and cameras and like visual inertial odometry techniques and various other things. The environmental factors will change, as I described. Pilot skill varies a little bit, so like obstacle avoidance and other similar features can matter. I can go on and on and on about this, but you just have to test everything absolutely as much as you can.
Thinking about that very first demo you gave where the officer just kind of swatted the drone down, if that happens in the real world where the drone is being used in a situation, what's the protocol? What happens if the drone gets knocked down?
We have a self-righting system now.
Okay.
So
explain what that means.
It's kind of cool. I think it's an elegant implementation of this. Basically, we drive. So our drones are quadcopters. So we have 4 rotors. We'll drive 2 of the rotors in reverse to generate reverse thrust and allow us to flip ourselves over. And the reason why I think it's elegant is early on we considered like a flipper arm or something like that in order to execute this maneuver, but that's more parts, more weight, more things to break, more cost, all of that. So we were able to figure out how to do this without adding any extra components to the drone.
Okay.
And then our exterior drones also have ballistic parachutes. So they have basically parachute canisters with small pyrotechnic charges. And then the parachute canisters have their own computers, batteries, and IMUs. So if anything ever goes wrong on the drone, the parachute can actually make its own decision to pop. It inflates very rapidly because of that pyrotechnic charge, and then the whole drone just sort of glides down.
Where does AI play into this?
Our drones won't even take off without it, actually.
Okay.
It's like that deeply integrated. So we use AI and ML techniques in order to aid our drones in understanding like where they are and how they're moving. So that's kind of how we're processing inbound video feeds into the drone. But there are so many cool things that we've done and are planning to do.
Is there someone, just on the back end making sure everything works when a drone is deployed, or is it fully autonomous at this point?
It varies. It's a good question. It varies a little bit on the product. For our interior drones, normally they're piloted with a handheld controller, which our customers actually like because SWAT operators have a lot of information about what's going on in the context of a SWAT call out, right? Like they might know that a suspect isn't in this half of the house. They could be concerned about a person like specifically here. And if that occurs, then they can use our drone to launch and go right there without wasting a bunch of time doing activities that might not be beneficial for the mission, right? So being able to fuse multiple camera feeds from snipers, if those are in place during a SWAT call out, et cetera, and then using that to aid in decision-making about where to place the drone that can be a strong strategy. I will say though, for our citywide system, autonomy makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
Because we know where the emergencies are in a jurisdiction, we know where our drones are, we know where our recharging stations are. So navigating from one of those recharging stations to an emergency is a fully automated process. We have sophisticated path planning algorithms that will number one, select the right drone to launch and actually respond to that 911 call. But they'll also deconflict with manned air traffic. So we've integrated with ground-based radar and also ADS-B systems. So we know where all of the manned aircraft are in a jurisdiction. If one is close by, the drone will reroute around it. We know where tall obstacles are in the jurisdictions where we're operating. So like cell towers and stuff, our drones will avoid those. We set minimum and maximum flight altitudes. So our systems are aware of that. And then our drone will just sort of take all that into account and navigate to the emergency. And only when it arrives does it hand over control to an operator.
Yeah, I think, as a normal person, as a daily citizen, thinking of AI and public safety just feels kind of contradictory sometimes. So how do you build trust not only with the agencies you're working with, but also the public who's receiving help from these drones?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I would say, the technology that we built, it's designed to respond to emergencies. Like when someone calls 911 and asks for help, like that's when our technology deploys. So like people are, opting into this existing. And we've built some technology too on the back end that I think can help communities get comfortable with this sort of technology being implemented. The core piece of technology that we built along those lines is our public transparency portal. So
Okay, what's that?
Basically, we publish to anyone that's interested the number of times one of our drones have launched and responded to an emergency, the types of emergencies, that those drones are responding to, average response times, but then we get more granular and show actual flight paths. So if someone sees a drone flying over their house, they're like, why was that there? They can look it up in our software, put in their location where they saw the drone, put in what time they saw the drone, and then they can see the purpose of that flight. So if it was responding to a structure fire, that would be published.
That's incredible. With AI, what do you think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of public safety?
Oh man, so much. I mean, one feature we're building now that I'm like really excited about is a video search box. So our drones are streaming back HD video and thermal imaging video all the time. But there are instances where first responders might be looking for something and it could be difficult to see within that like camera's field of view. So we're adding this feature where they can type in something like white bag or 6 foot tall male, or like even a license plate number. And if that's seen anywhere in the video feed, it will send an alert and then draw a bounding box around that thing.
Okay.
So for various searching missions, like that can be pretty beneficial. You can think about like a search and rescue use case, like someone is wearing a red jacket. You could type in like 6 foot tall dude with a red jacket. And if that's ever seen, it would send an alert.
Okay, very cool. You're working with a lot of agencies now, but when you were first starting out, I know you signed Vegas as your first customer, but was there any challenge in convincing agencies to use your product?
Yeah, that's also a great question. Less than I expected.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think when we deliver a demonstration of our technology, what SWAT operators are thinking about is the situation that they encountered 3 years ago where they didn't know someone was hiding in a closet and that person shot one of their friends or something along those lines, or they were put in a position where they had used force on someone. And they really don't want to do that. Like that is not why they're in this job. They are in this job to keep people safe. So when they see our technology and they think back to that event, they realize that like maybe this could have helped. Maybe this could have added the information that they needed to avoid that bad outcome. And then they generally want to adopt it.
Okay, very cool. Who's the competition when it comes to working with these agencies?
Yeah, I would say in the interior segment, we don't really have much direct competition.
Okay.
DJI has an interior drone, but it's missing a lot of core features that our drone has, like a two-way audio system, a glass breaker, thermal imaging capabilities, mesh networking radios, like many things that matter a lot to first responders. So in that category, I think we have a very dominant position right now. As far as citywide 911 response drone networks, we do have more direct competition in Skydio, who currently is like the largest drone company in America. We're number 2 quadcopter company, but yeah.
Well, DJI is based in China.
Yes.
There's a lot going on with the trade war with
Indeed.
China. You have been sanctioned twice.
Yes,
actually.
I have. Yes.
And on the list is also Skydio.
Right.
How has that affected your business?
Yeah. So I've been personally sanctioned, meaning I can't go to China. And Brink has been sanctioned twice now. It hasn't affected our business very much because our drones already had to be what's called NDAA compliant, meaning that in order to sell to our customer base, we have not been allowed to buy processors, sensors, radios, anything like that from Chinese suppliers. So our supply chain is just decoupled from China, and we don't sell to Chinese buyers. So between not working with Chinese companies to build our drones and not selling to anyone in China, it hasn't been a big deal.
So why has China sanctioned you twice then?
That is an excellent question. Really an excellent question. I mean, they claim it's because of military collaboration with Taiwan,
Okay.
which is something that we really have not done. But that is their published reason for sanctioning us. I think the reality is they view drones as a very critical military technology, and they don't want the free world or the United States to have any capacity to build these systems. Okay. So they're like doing what they can in order to prevent the US drone industry from growing.
How have tariffs affected you, if not the China tariffs, but the ones that, Donald Trump has put forward, even though they're on a pause right now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question too. So they've increased our bill of materials costs, right? Because we work with many US suppliers, but we also have an international supply chain. We work with companies in Japan and South Korea and the UK and like various other places. So our BOM cost has increased. However, the cost of competitive DJI drones has also gone up dramatically. So I actually think this is likely a small net positive for us.
What about Skydio? Do you have any insight into how that competition will fare because of sanctions and tariffs?
My impression is they're facing similar pressures on like either side. So they also have a global supply chain. Their BOM cost increased, but their biggest competitor is also DJI, and those drones are still more expensive. So I think we're both winners. Like the U.S. drone industry is probably a modest winner.
You're building something that could be used as a weapon, and you're instead using it for public safety, right? Or not necessarily as a weapon, but in those kinds of situations where it could be used for something a lot more, way more high stakes.
Yeah.
How do you balance that vision with, having this powerful tech, but running a company that's dedicated to public safety?
Yeah. I think it's a little bit like nuclear power, right? In that there are amazing civil applications of nuclear power that can benefit humanity. And there are also extensive military applications for nuclear power that can like end the world. Drones are sort of similar. Like there are ways that this technology can massively improve quality of life and save a lot of people's lives. And I think that's like a beautiful, amazing future that we should make happen. But clearly, looking at what's going on in Ukraine and in other places in the world, like these are also powerful weapons of war. And I think our species is going to use this for both of those missions.
Would you ever branch out of public safety?
It's hard to say. I think if the U.S. got into some major hot war with China, it would be like, I care about democracy existing, right? So it would be difficult to not have conversations along those lines. However, right now we really do sell exclusively to public safety. It's a community I care a lot about. It's a mission that I passionately love. And unless something absolutely catastrophic happens from a geopolitical standpoint, I don't think we're going to change focus.
Okay, gotcha. With building such a startup also comes hiring the right people who are aligned with your vision. How has that worked out?
It's gotten better over the years. That's for sure. Our team is really excellent. We moved to Seattle, Washington. We've recruited extensively from SpaceX, Starlink, and Amazon Prime Air, their Amazon's like drone delivery program, Amazon Project Kuiper, like their internet satellite division, and like many other similar companies and similar teams. And yeah, we have a great team now. Like a strong leadership layer, very strong individual contributors. On the go-to-market side, we've recruited a lot from public safety. So many of our salespeople used to be police officers or firefighters or, people in that world.
How would you describe yourself as a business leader?
That's a broad question. I think my general approach to leadership is I try to hire the absolute best people that I can, give them context about the pressures that we're facing as an organization. So they have a good decision-making framework to, evaluate things with as they come up, and then I let them operate.
Amazing.
And if things go well, that's amazing. And like if things go less well, then, in some cases we look for new leadership. But things have been going very well recently. So I'm grateful for that.
Looking back at everything you've built, how far you've come, what is one thing you would tell your 18-year-old self?
What I think would have been like very encouraging is just that it does kind of work, like you kind of get there, like it's not going to be just failure forever. Like there will come a moment where you get a lot of what you want.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Blake.
Thank you. This has been fun. I really appreciate it.